So I'm sure you have some advice for our students who might be struggling with boundaries. Can you share something that might help our students struggling?
The biggest thing I learned in undergrad was to not spread myself too thin, or should I say, I learned from my failure of spreading myself too thin. I was really convinced that I had to be involved in every organization related to my field. I had to have constant internships and a part time job on top of that. And I had to be the best of my class. And all of that pressure will really wear you down. You can just go from the peak of doing it all to like a complete burnout. And it ended up in me getting really sick. I had like strep throat 12 times in 2 years and had to get surgery for it because I just was not taking care of my health or prioritizing sleep. And so I just had a total burnout. And that was something I told myself going into grad school. I was going to take a much easier load and be a lot more patient with myself. So it is important to be involved. I recommend being in a club, getting an internship, all of those things, but you don't have to do it all at once. And remember that quality is much more important than quantity. You can have less things on your resume, but more to say about them. That looks better than having a million different things and just two bullet points about each thing. So, yeah, be gentle with yourself and take care of yourself. And one way that I do that now is by trying to be outside as much as I can. This was easy for me in undergrad with walking to all my classes, but ever since COVID hit, I think most of you can probably relate to taking a lot of online classes. This semester, all my classes are online. I TA online, and I could literally stay in my house and order groceries and never leave if I wanted to. And that kind of isolation is really dangerous. It's really easy to fall into depression or a lack of motivation. So, just a simple way I try to combat that is every morning I go outside just to my front yard and stretch, or I go on a little walk around the neighborhood just to recharge and get some vitamin D. And then when I'm working on homework all day or grading and I'm starting to feel burnout, instead of going on my phone, which is just going from one screen to another, I go outside. I take a 10-minute walk and can just really reset. So I recommend like finding ways to either connect with nature or like call a friend. Um, some way to connect yourself to the outside world and talk to people instead of just staring at screens all day.
Claire, what part of public relations do you love the most and why?
So the part that I've enjoyed most about working in PR is communicating with people that have similar interests. If you're able to find a career in PR that's related to an interest of yours, you're going to be a lot happier. So I've done a lot of work with museums, and I hope to do PR for museums or work for a PR firm that specializes in clients in the fine arts field. So just talking to people about an interest you have and incorporating that into your work is huge. And public relations and communication is so broad, you can find something that's related to your interests. Another thing I really enjoyed was event planning. A place like a museum is going to have a lot of events. So it's just really cool to bring people together and have fun related to your work and what you're passionate about. One of my roles was to reach out to restaurants and businesses to create sponsorships where they would donate food and merchandise for our events. And this really scared me, reaching out to people asking for free stuff. I was like, who would want to give me free stuff? This intern at a museum, who wants to give anyone free stuff? But I sent out a bunch of emails, and I was shocked that nearly every one of them at least responded, and the majority of them did want to donate to us with a promise that we would mention them as sponsors or on our social media and our event programs. So you would really be surprised how many organizations are willing to work with you. Just cast a large net. Don't take it personally when people don't respond, because if you cast a large net, you are guaranteed to catch something. Um, Another part of my work that I really enjoyed was writing press releases and blog posts. I enjoy doing research in school, but I often feel overwhelmed by big research assignments that have to be perfect and I'm getting graded on them. But one thing I really like about doing press releases and blog posts is that no one knows I'm the individual sending everything out. There's comfort in anonymity. And when you're reading a press release for a social media post, for an event, for an organization, you're never thinking, I wonder who wrote this. So find comfort in that, find comfort, and that'll help you build confidence in your writing so that when you do talk to people personally, you have those skills and you're more secure in reaching out to people, organizations, and colleagues.
What were some of the most challenging things that you faced on the job? What were the parts of the job where you were like, "Ooh, this is going to be a really exciting problem to solve"?
A constant challenge in PR is dealing with anything controversial. So, especially like museums deal with a lot of controversial stuff, and they actually really enjoy controversial stuff because it starts a conversation and it brings people in. There's that old saying that like no press is bad press. I don't really believe that anymore with like cancel culture, but there is just enough amount of like controversial or like touchy press that actually can be really good. So, for example, I had to write a press release on an exhibit on Syria by this one photographer who was a white American man who really enjoyed going to Syria. He was an art historian and a big name in the art field. And he went there before all the war and he went there after. And he had these pictures before and after. And it was this really cool commentary. And the pictures were beautiful, so well done on the quick change and the demolition of this wonderful history that we had had in these places for thousands of years that had recently been destroyed by terrorist attacks and war. So it was really cool in that aspect. But then a lot of people were concerned that, it was just this white American man profiting off of a tragedy in Syria. And so there's that like conversation, and you have to learn how to make the press releases sound just really objective. And we didn't make it sound like he was doing something amazing. We didn't make it sound like he was doing something awful. In museums, you want people to come and have those conversations because those are important conversations. And that question of, are people appropriating this tragedy? That's an important conversation. But there's also a lot you could learn from his work, and it could be very inspirational to others. And we did include at the bottom, he had links to on all his websites, and we put it on our press releases of places you could go to donate to help the aid efforts in Syria. So it's just like finding ways to handle these touchy subjects. And it's okay if people argue in certain aspects. You want a little bit of controversy, but you also want to do things respectfully. So that's a challenge that I really liked learning how to handle.
What side of that debate do you fall on? Because there have been calls from different nation states to return items that are in museums. And the argument is, well, we want to be able to display these to the world, to other people.
Right.
And the countries are saying, well, we can do that here where they belong. They were stolen from us, literally. So, what do you think about that argument?
So I'm definitely on the side of the original nations when it comes to actual artifacts taken from their countries. Like, I would love to see them go back. I mean, it is, there are so many amazing museums in America that, for example, have Egyptian exhibits, and those always seem a little touchy to me because they literally have like people's bodies there, in tombs. And I think that, most nations aren't calling for the complete return of all their artifacts. Most nations understand that having their culture in different parts of the world benefits them. So I do want to respect the certain nations that want certain specific artifacts back. I completely respect that. In this situation with the exhibit I was talking about, he was just taking photographs. So it's not like he took anything from um, these nations. But there was also another sticky situation because some museums outside of Syria were calling Syria and being like, "Will you send us your stuff because we don't want it blown up?" And Syria was like, "No, it's our stuff. We're not giving you our stuff just because we're going through war right now. Like, have some sympathy." But other parts of the world were like, "But we really want to protect these." So, yeah, very, very interesting and tricky conversation.
When you're practicing public relations, what are some of the most useful or most central approaches or paradigms that you've used to make your work more easy to understand?
So, one thing that I learned actually from a classmate of mine is that you can go through any article you're reading, especially like class materials, and highlight words and phrases that you're impressed by. For example, I have to read a lot of articles in my communications classes. So I will highlight words that seem bigger than my current level of vocabulary or more impressive than my current level of vocabulary. These can be anything from transitional phrases to adjectives to concepts. And then I write them down just in my notes app. I have a list literally called words. And when I'm writing papers, I will write it in my voice and then I will go back through and see, okay, this word's kind of basic, like it could be better, and I'll look at my notes app and find like more impressive, like higher vocabulary words that I can replace. And soon enough, you keep doing that, those words will become a part of your own vocabulary and will work their way into your writing without you having to even think about it. And you just will sound so much more professional. Um, Another thing I've learned to do, especially just with public relations, again, it's so much writing. Before you submit a press release, before you submit even just a big assignment or a project in your class or essays, print it out. I can reread and like proofread my papers a million times on the computer, but I will always find typos or things that I think, oh, this doesn't really make sense here. Once I've printed it out, looking at screens for so long, just it's too much on our brains sometimes. So print things out, go back to the basics. Don't be afraid to take vocabulary from here and there, and yeah, just find simple ways to go back to the basics when you're working on your writing.
I know that we played a little bit with Chat GPT. I wanted to get your initial reactions to how that AI might help a public relations professional.
Yeah, that was terrifying was my first reaction because I remember you asked me to just say a prompt and I was like, "Okay, write a press release for this museum on this." And it just boom 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 like wrote it perfectly. Um I think it's obviously going to be very useful for that, and it can be useful in checking your work, but it can also be dangerous because um as much as it's great to have these things as an aid, you can't just copy and paste because you'll lose your skills. And when you're working in an office, um, in meetings you're gonna have, you're gonna want to be able to have the vocabulary and the skill set to talk about things and not say, wait. let me ask Chat GPT and get back to you on that. So, definitely use it as an aid, but not a crutch.
I think that's excellent advice, especially considering that it improves, and the more it improves, the more we might be tempted to trust it and use it in our work, especially our writing intensive work like in public relations. Claire, how do we know you've made an impact?
Well, just starting off in the office before it even reaches its way out, don't be afraid to ask your bosses, your colleagues, your internship directors about your work. What did they like? What about your writing was weak? This can help you become stronger, and they'll be impressed that you're taking the initiative to reach out for constructive criticism that will help improve the organization. And then another way is obviously, especially in this day and age, social media, those following numbers. The higher you can get, the more engagement you can get online is a great way to measure um, promotion, promotional success. Another way that I personally have been able to see success in my communication field was through the outcome of events that I had thrown. So, how many people showed up? Did they look like they were having fun? What part of the event seemed to be a hit? What parts were passed over? So, we had a lot of different stations at the museum nights that I would organize, like little craft tables and photo booths and tours. So, which were the ones that people were flocking towards? And why weren't they going to other ones? Was the audience just plain out like not interested in that, or was there a problem that you could fix and improve upon next time? So listen to your audience and ask them what they would like to participate in and what they would like to see.
What advice do you have for people who are trying to grow their following, for people who are working to make sure that they have a resume in their social media?
Obviously, pay attention to trends. TikTok is definitely the trendiest. You can use certain sounds and adapt that to your organization. Stories, just be constant, but be selective about what you put out, because if you're putting out 20 stories a day, you might get muted or unfollowed. So, again, quality over quantity, but you still want to make sure you're active at least every day with something on your platforms. Follow similar platforms to your organization. Oftentimes, that will put you in the recommended. When people follow those organizations, they're more likely to see yours. So, for example, if I was working in a museum's PR department, that museum would be following all like the top museums or even smaller local galleries in the area. And you can build a mutual relationship that way. You can find ways to connect with each other, and possibly grow events, create exhibitions together. Most exhibitions in the museum world are traveling and go to multiple museums. So that's just an easy way to reach out. And then when people visit other museums' websites, the recommended will have you in it. So, yeah, follow people in your field.
Gotcha. And are there any things that in a social media strategy you found more useful? Are there any tips that you might have used in your field and working in public relations that might have improved the social media game for your particular client?
Call to actions are great. You can also do those kind of like giveaways where, if you follow and you post if you repost our story, you'll be in a contest to win free tickets to the museum or something like that. So that gets your followers to engage with their followers who don't follow you. So I think that's a really good way to get people's attention.
Claire, what's one piece of advice you would have for someone starting out in public relations?
So, one piece of advice I would give is to find ways to passively engage yourself in your field and become comfortable with their vocabulary and more knowledgeable about the conversations they're having. And find ways to do it that are easy for you and feel less like research and work. So, one way that I've dealt with this is following a lot of social media accounts of other businesses in my industry. For me, it's the museum industry. So, on my personal Instagram account, I follow a lot of different museums and galleries, and then I see the artists they're posting, I'm following them, and that way it's a really easy step to immerse yourself in that world. I'm When I'm just scrolling through my phone, I'm able to soak up a lot of information and knowledge about what's current in the contemporary art world. I also follow several PR firms that are dedicated to the fine arts field, and just through scrolling through their social media and or listening to podcasts related to that world, I'm able to gain information, and I'm able to see the way that these firms talk about their clients and how they do their PR.
Do you have an approach to crisis management that you might be able to share? Because as you were listing those things that people should be able to be doing in preparation to get the job, I was thinking, wait, I forgot. I wanted to ask her about crisis management specifically and crisis public relations communication.
I mentioned earlier about dealing with controversial topics. I would start out like pretty neutral and let people have the conversation. Now, if you're in an actual crisis where your company, an individual at your organization has done something wrong, um, I my best piece of advice would just be to accept it wholeheartedly and honestly, and make sure that your statement that you put out doesn't sound identical to any other statement that your company has put out for previous scandals. Try to make it as personable as possible, and make it clear that you're actually taking lessons to hold yourself and the organization accountable. So, say it gets leaked that there's some sort of sexual harassment in the workplace, you don't want to just like put out a press release being like, we're so sorry this happened, we're firing the individual. How can you make sure that doesn't happen again? So you might want to say, we already enrolled our entire staff in a course for sexual harassment in the workplace, and you want to find ways to actually show to your community that you're not only taking actions to get justice for what happened, you're taking actions to prevent something like that from happening again.
That's excellent advice. What are some of the most common issues that people might face when they're first on the job? For example, I know a lot of people struggle with imposter syndrome. Maybe you have some experiences that could help us frame that conversation.
Right. So I think the word imposter syndrome is actually kind of funny, because I think if you don't struggle with imposter syndrome, you're the actual imposter, because everyone I know struggles with imposter syndrome. I hear all the time from my brilliant friends and classmates that they feel like they aren't good enough for the programs and that they're faking their way through it. But the truth of the matter is, if you got in, you deserve to be there. The program wants you. So whenever I feel like I don't belong or I'm not good enough, I remind myself that everyone else feels that way too. Now, if you find yourself really not relating to the material or not having any interest in what you're learning or the work you're doing, that's a different story. And it might be time to reevaluate what you want to study and what kind of career you want to pursue. But if you have a genuine interest, you belong. So talk to your friends and classmates. There is comfort in not feeling alone with your doubts. For example, when I was applying to graduate school, I felt a ton of imposter syndrome. And even though I had several experiences with communication and PR in clubs and organizations and internships, I didn't study communication in my undergraduate career. So this really worried me. I didn't think I was going to get in anywhere, but I did. And the great thing about the communication field is that it is so broad. You can find opportunities to practice communication skills anywhere, whether it be in a leadership position or a restaurant job. I put my restaurant job on my grad school application resume, because I had to do a ton of communicating there and memorization and dealing with different staff and customers and advertising the products. So um, don't be afraid to put these experiences on your resume. Just make it clear that communication was a really key aspect of your role.
Wonderful. I know that no matter how much experience you have, no matter what your degrees, people often struggle with that. So thank you for sharing. Claire, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your perspectives on public relations.
Thank you so much for having me.